Right. Okay. Well, thank you all for joining today. Very kind. My name is Paul Myles. I've been involved with the Thomas Paine UK Society for, gosh, it was a long time, 2007. I first got involved when I was asked to consider putting on a major exhibition in Lewis, where he lived from 1768 for 1774, just before he departed to the colonies for the first time. And in preparation, I agreed to do it. I'd run a few big exhibitions in town, so I was used to doing large scale events. But I'd never done anything like this before. This was new to me. I was a businessman in various business, but mainly construction, but also had completed a couple of degrees in psychology, and I just finished a master's, so I was kind of wired for research, if you like. Um, and I took the challenge on of mounting a festival to celebrate really the time that he'd spent in Lewis. And on closer inspection, it was realised when you trawl through all the biographies, very little was known about his time in Lewis. So I set to with research with the most eminent local historian, Dr. Colin Brent, and I was fortunate to meet Dr. Seth Gopin, who's an art historian from Rutgers University, but he managed the worldwide study resource um, for the university, and he was very interested in American. He was very interested in, and the three of us did. I arranged seminars for 2 years, once a week. The three of us would really, really work at this and try and figure out what was going on. And it was a wonderful period. It was a wonderful period of research. With these two really bright guys at the top of their academic fields, and myself as a very interested person, trying to get the thing right. And we produced out of that, we produced the first book, Thomas Paine in Lewis, 1768 to 1774. And in that book, I became very interested in the pamphlet that Thomas Paine wrote in Lewis, which was called The Case of the Officers of Excise. And I became more and more interested in that story. I didn't think it had ever really been written about properly, and it seemed a very serious thing to have happened. So I wrote the first essay about it in that first book, but it had a research question left unanswered, which triggered another period of research from it was 2009 that the festival ended, and I managed to. It was about 6 or 7 years, not constant research, but I joined forces with Professor Watmore at the University of Sussex and started doing a DPhil with him. Actually, I didn't want to finish it. I wanted to write this book, so that's what I did eventually. But I took students under my wing, if you like, and helped them in their studies. And one of the things that came out of it were real discoveries, actually, which allowed me eventually to write this story up. So this is a story about Thomas Paine in the excise service, and I shall talk about. I'll try and keep on topic. I'll try and talk about the book that I wrote and what's in it, which is all backed up with evidence. We found enough hard evidence to tell the story. I mean, there's always bits missing, and there's now I go back to it and read it again. I finished this in 2018, and I just read my book again in order to give this talk. And gosh, it's like someone else had written it actually, but it brought fresh questions into my mind, and I know that most people know that the collected works is coming out soon, which is going to open up the Lewis area a lot more as well. So that will not change anything I've written in this book, but it will give deeper dimensions to it, and there'll be more exciting findings coming out afterwards. So I aim to talk until about quarter to, well, it's 7:45 here in England, but for three-quarters of an hour in the first instance. And I want about this book, and then I want to end up talking about the newspaper a bit, the newspaper research, because I have some new stuff to report, actually, and ongoing research, which deepens this, the work that comes out of this. So let's go back to the what happened here then. And what I'm going to switch now to show you a couple of documents. I'm going to flick in and out of a PowerPoint or keynote presentation just to show things. And what really caught my attention was a letter from Thomas Paine in his own hand to Dr. Oliver Goldsmith, the great Oliver Goldsmith, who the playwright, who was friends with the great Samuel Johnson and Garrick and a cluster of very notable writers, playwrights, intelligentsia who met in the Turk's Head in London. He was part of a luncheon club there, a debating club, and he was famous. I mean, everyone at that time knew Oliver Goldsmith. He had written The Deserted Village, and he'd written the play just before he died, actually. Paine probably wouldn't have seen it, but She Stoops to Conquer, a play that I've been in, actually. But since he wrote that and Garrick put it on in London, it's never been off a stage somewhere in the world. Somewhere in the world, someone's playing She Stoops to Conquer right now. So he wrote this letter to Oliver Goldsmith, and I'm going to go to that letter now to show you it, because it's rather nice. I got the high resolution facsimile from the British Library, I think I got it from, but I'll show you that now. I've got to share the screen and get to the right place. So can you see that? Can you see the case? So here we go. Can someone answer? Can you see that okay, Adrian?
Yep, now it's working.
Yeah, good. So this is the book, by the way, just the front cover of my book. But this here is the letter, and the actual letter. I've held it in my hands. It's a wonderful thing to look at closely, and it's to Dr. Goldsmith, and it's written from the Excise Coffee House in December the 21st, 1772. Now, at this time, on paper and through the excise records, Thomas Paine is an outrider of excise in Lewes. Now, it's starting to look like he never actually did that job. He was too busy doing other things, but that was his job, which was a lowly position, one step above supernumerary. And so for him to be sitting up in the Excise Coffee House in December the 21st, 1772 is remarkable all on its own. He's not a supervisor. He's not a collector. These are the two higher offices above the ordinary officers of the excise service. And I go into that in some depth in this book, what the excise was like at that time. So this is unusual all on its own. This is the letter, and it's too small to read, but I'd just like to show it to you to, it's in a fair hand. It's there are not many corrections or insertions. It's carefully done. And this is how it ends up. And it says there, you can see Excise Coffee House, Broad Street, and the date. And he says, shall I take the liberty of waiting on you in a day or two? They never did meet. It's claimed that he did in some biographies. I've trawled and looked, and Goldsmith dies soon after this, and they never got together. But in this letter, these are the bits that are interesting. This is the bit that really started me on my research. So he sends in the main part of the letter, he says, I present to you the case. So he'd written the case of the Officers of Excise, and I'll talk about that at the moment. It's cases were written in that time. You had petitions and you had cases, and the case laid out the argument for something, whatever it is you wanted. You would write a case, and this is the case of the Officers of Excise. I'm going to detail on that in a minute. But you can see here he says, "'Tis my first and only attempt at writing, that is, and even now I should not have undertaken it had I not been particularly applied to by some of my superiors in office." So there we have, bang. in most of the biographies, and oldest, the first Chalmers, the first damning biographer, said he was just a rabble rouser. He got his guys together. He was just irritating. But here he says it in his own words, applied to by some of my superiors in office. Well, who could that be? And here he says it again. I act myself in the humble station of an officer of excise, though somewhat differently circumstanced in what in any of them are, and have been the principal promoter of a plan for applying to Parliament this session for an increase of salary. A petition for this purpose has been circulated through every part of the kingdom and signed by all of the officers therein. Now, there's 2,800 to 3,000 officers in the UK at this time. And I'm going to come out of this for a minute and go back to the screen. So there we are. I've stopped sharing. Am I with you again? Yep. If you could nod, Adrian, then yeah, jolly good. So this was what I couldn't find, and we'd been through, pardon me, a serious trawl of records. We'd found some other documents which had been mentioned in a previous book by George Hindmarch. It was Hindmarch. A chap called George Hindmarch I was following, actually. He was deceased by this time, but he'd written a little book called The Case of the King of England and the Officers of Excise. And George was an excise man himself, and he knew how to interpret the 18th century minute book records and all the correspondence of the excise service. Being a modern excise serviceman, he was he knew how to understand how it was written, and we'll talk about that a bit in a minute. There's a specific way of interpreting the minute book, which he laid open very well. And George wrote it all out, and I could follow his argument, but he didn't give any references. And I thought, well, okay, I've got to start again. Having came off a science degree, I liked evidence, so I wanted to hold everything in my hand. And it was very difficult to find, because where he didn't reference it, he didn't say where it was in the first place. And when I went looking at where I thought it might have been, it wasn't. And I had to trawl around Liverpool and London and different offices, and before I found the material, all in the treasury boxes in the National Archives. They'd made their way there, and they were in the treasury boxes of the archive, uncatalogued. So we had to trawl and trawl and trawl through days and days and days through boxes before we found this material. So we're fairly confident of the first bit that George Hindmarch wrote about, and I'll come to that in a minute. But what was missing was those signatures. And I didn't feel as I could tell this story properly until I could at least see some of these signatures. But they were nowhere, in no biographies, in no public records anywhere in England. And so this was really the hunt. The hunt was on, I couldn't, and this took years. So I'm going to go back to the presentation now, just to go through this a bit more. Here we are. So here we are. So these, he says, a petition for this purpose has been circulated through every part of the kingdom and signed by all the officers therein. So this was the hunt. And so just before we get to those signatures, this is the stuff we did know about. So there's a few moving parts to this campaign, and it's taken a while. And even going back to it now, I think, oh gosh, they probably did it this way or that way. But what happened here was this was eventually sent to, this is after the signatures are some years earlier. The petition that went round the whole of England and Scotland was some years earlier than this petition, which is a petition written by a committee of 8 excise officers. And you'll see at the bottom of that, the signatures down the bottom, you can see Thomas Paine. And in my book, I lay out who the other officers were. and they were from Nottingham and London. Paine could not have known these people. So I doubt if they ever met. It started to become very apparent that this was organised by the highest offices of the excise services, and eventually it comes out that it's George Lewis Scott. And George Lewis Scott is one of the 9 commissioners of excise. It's a very high office. They earn £1,000 a year. An excise man is paid £50 a year, an outrider, of which he only gets £46, I think, is after deductions for this thing and that thing. So they don't earn much more, if any more, than a common labourer. An excise man, highly skilled, is on very low wages. The problem's been there's been no wage rise for 100 years. There's been an inflationary period, and they're really struggling. And this petition is written to the Treasury. It's written directly to the Treasury by this committee of 8 officers of excise. It's not from the commissioners. This is the letter from the commissioners that have forwarded that petition. There's the petition. This is the forwarding letter from the commissioners of excise. And here you can see a chap in the middle there, George Lewis Scott. We know from later correspondence between Paine and Scott that Scott is the promoter. Scott has chosen Paine, Thomas Paine, to write the case of the officers of excise. And the reasons why that is can become apparent later, if I remember to say it. There's a lot of moving parts to this, and I won't be able to say the whole thing. It's almost a course. But here we have, so there we have the petition in 1772, I think this is, 1773, and there's the covering letter. This was the answer from the Treasury, and you can see it just above the stamp there. What they get is nothing, nil, and it's responded to very quickly. So it's responded at February the 5th, and it's read on February the 9th, 1773. So this petition was forwarded by the Commissioners of Excise in 1773, and they very quickly get an answer back: you get nothing. Now, the reasons for that is they didn't know how to do it. They'd been getting petitions from the Navy. The silk weavers have been agitating strongly. That came up a lot in the Treasury. It's a whole nother story. But this will stick to the officers of excise. This orchestrated campaign came to nothing. What this was, this petition here, the case had already been sent to both houses of Parliament and important business people in the country. That it didn't accompany this petition. I think it had already been sent. They'd all seen the case. It's separate to the petition. The case supported the petition. It's a separate document. So here we have the petition. There we have the forwarding letter from the commissioners. There we have the answer. So I had all that, but I didn't have the signatures. And then after this trawl of many, many, many visits, all of a sudden, here we go. There is 1769, quite a bit earlier, 1769. And this was an important clue. This is the Officers of the Revenue of Excise for here and it had Scotland, but it's crossed out and you've got Wales, Memorial for Additional Pay, right? This is a petition from the officers for additional pay. And this is the petition that went right round the entire country. But it's in 1769. It's quite a long time before Paine. I'm not sure Paine's involved at this time even. So there we are, a little bit more evidence, and there they are. We found the signatures. It was a wonderful moment at last. And the petition at the top reads much like, but in slightly clunkier language, the petition that I strongly suspect Paine wrote from the Officers of Eight. And here's another, another. We found three documents. We didn't find them all. We didn't find 3,000, but we found three documents from Hereford and Wales. And these are the signatures, the individual officers, what they did, where they were, and there we are. So before I get to the excise books, I want to just go back to these signatures again and just ponder on that a bit. Because imagine this, that this piece of paper has to go to there are 53 collections of excise in the UK. Lewis was a collection, so it's a big area. And then in those collections, they're subdivided down into rides. And in those rides, you have supervisors. So you have collectors and you have supervisors. Now, in this book, I'm going to come out of this for a minute and then talk to you directly. So I have to work out how to do this every time. There we go. I'm back with you, Adrian. Yeah. So here's the thing. So there we have the evidence of the commissioners being promoting or putting forward the petition from the 8 officers of excise, a committee. That goes with the petition. The case has been written, that's gone forward. But earlier, there's this petition, these pieces of paper that have been sent out from central office. They had to be. And in the book, and I can't labour it all here, but I do go through every single document of every movement of Paine through the excise office. And the first, I've got him being taken on as a supernumerary, as a trainee. He remains in that position for quite a long time on half pay, carrying the bag around for the supervisor, actually. Then he gets made an officer. Then he gets discharged for stamping his ride. He gets the sack, but it's called discharged. And it's for stamping his ride, and that offence is stamping your book as though you've been to a place when you actually haven't been there. It was quite common, and Paine had to leave the service at that point. But here's the thing, and Highmarch showed this up, and I went back and got the evidence of this. The convention at that time is that if anybody in a collection or a ride was found out for corruption, the last one to join the service got the sack. They took the rap. They wouldn't have done the crime, but they were the ones. This was the convention right through the country. So it turns out that not long after Paine is discharged, his supervisor was a chap called Swallow, who was he was a very experienced supervisor and corrupt. The collector, a chap called Birdsworth, was new in the job and didn't know what he was doing. So it turns out that just a month after that Paine is discharged, Swallow is apprehended, stamping rides and using Paine's orderly books as well. The convention being that it was quite common to get discharged. If you admitted it, it's a bit like the Japanese legal system at the moment. If you've just seen that documentary, if you admitted the charge, you got a job back quite quickly, but you had to admit it. And so there was corruption right through the whole service. And I think what happened here, I'm pretty sure that I know that Scott, we'll go back to the Commissioner of Excise, George Lewis Scott. He's brought in, he isn't a grace and favour man. He's brought into the service because he's an extremely accomplished mathematician and statistician. Previously tutor to King George III, so he's well known in court circles, but he's a very clever man. I've got letters from him to other demois, very respected mathematicians at that time, trying to work out things like how many people live in the country, how much money there is in the country, etc. He's brought in because they know they have a problem in the service. The King George III, has taken the crown. He's inexperienced. He does not get a good settlement. He doesn't get a good civil settlement. He gets £800,000 a year. It isn't enough. He gets a worse settlement than King George II. He's naive. Parliament know that, and so they keep him tight. He keeps running out of money. King George III is the employer of the excise, and he's dependent on that income. Although he doesn't control it, he's dependent on how much money that the revenue is collecting for dispersal by the government. So the government is short of money because of corruption in the excise service, and they know it. So what happens is Paine is discharged. I go through it step by step in the book, and I can't memorize it all. I'm afraid you're going to have to buy the book if you're that interested, or I could teach a course on this. But as Paine goes through the excise service, it becomes very obvious that at some point he meets George Lewis Scott. I don't quite know exactly when that is. I have my suspicions, and more might come out later with the collected works. But Scott's brought in, and what brings the whole thing to a head? Now imagine this in the country, all the corruption that's going on. The guys that are running the corruption are running the scams. They're short of money, so they have to do it, by the way. Paine points this out. This is why this is going wrong. They're not getting paid enough, so they're going to take it from wherever they can. So they do it with corrupt tradespeople, and they take bribes, and they stamp, and they keep money. But what's happening all over the country is no one's getting at, but it never happens. The supervisor never takes a rap. The collector never takes a rap. The newbies take the rap. And you get this churn of officers at the lowest level. Scott knows it isn't working. The excise service knows it isn't working. So what brings this to a head is Cornwall, the Cornwall collection in £1 is so corrupt, they have to deal with it. And this takes up, and I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint presentation now, because I can show you this. Here we go. I think that's the one. Yeah, here we go. I need to get this to the right place. Here we are. So the minute books of the excise, I'll talk very briefly about them, but they get sent up. The minute books are kept by the collector, the supervisor and collectors, and the keepers of the office. The office in Lewes was the White Hart Inn, actually. Verrill might well have been the collector, I think he was. But they keep a record of they're very tight character references, actually. And these books, the minute books, are sent up to the central office every month, and they're read out to the commissioners. And they're very short entries. Most moves, they're called removes or discharges or taking on officers or anything about a collection. It's all in the minute book. And they're very short entries. It's very, very rare for this to happen. It was a 20-page entry for Cornwall, and it's a mass exposure of the corruption. It's read out to the commissioners on the 12th of July 1768 as Paine arrives in Lewes. Now, when Paine's discharged, he was offered a job. His first offer was to be an excise officer in £1. This is Cornwall, and he refuses it. That's unusual. He must have known. He's then offered a job as an officer in Wells, which he accepts, and he's going to go there, but something happens in Wells. It's in the minute book. I think the guy was ill, and he recovers, and he takes his job back again. Said Paine can't have that job, and then he comes to Lewes. So whether he's placed in Lewes or not, there is talk about. I think there's a book coming out that says that he's placed in Lewes by the 3rd Duke of Norfolk. I mean, I need to look a bit closer into that. But the fact that he's accepted a job in Wales tends to suggest this is a bit more random. I don't know. But anyway, Paine arrives in Lewes. It's all gone wrong in Cornwall. And what's happened in Cornwall is this is just some of it. It goes on and on and on. 20 pages of this corruption and all the different types of corruption as well. So stamping is so corrupt down there that they've the hide stamp has rusted. You know, they haven't used it for years. So am I back with you, Adrian? Have I stopped sharing? Thank you. It's rusted. So, and then what's interesting, what comes out of all this, for the first time ever, supervisors and collectors have been sacked. It's changed. Something's changed fundamentally here. And this is just at the time after the petition has gone round and that Paine writes the case. So there's been a fundamental shift in the way that the organisation of the excise service, they're not putting up with this corruption anymore. They want to deal with it. And therefore, you know, in the last 10 minutes here, I can talk about the case itself. So what Paine writes, and it's in four sections. It's an introduction. It's the state of the salary, where he lays out that, you know, that there's inflation in the country. And this is when you start to see Paine's language for the very first time in the way that he writes right through his life. It's pithy, it's elegant, it's to the point. He argues, he debates, and you know, he gives it full throttle here. So he lays out that the money's not enough, and this is a little bit. I'll read out. This is from his case. It's a particularly powerful passage, describes the inflationary times. I quote, "If the increase of money in the kingdom is one cause of the high price of provision, the case of the officers is particularly pitiable. No increase comes to them. By law, it was by law they couldn't have a pay rise, by the way. And he says, they are shut out from the general blessing. They behold it like a map of Peru." It's such lovely writing. And then he goes on in this section where the officers are removed. So it's a bit like the army. They're told where to go. They can't argue with that. They have to go where they're told, mainly. Although Paine did refuse Grand Pound. That's interesting. But he says, as the law of their office removes them far from all their natural friends and relations, it consequently prevents those occasional assistances from which they are serviceably felt in a family, and which even the poorest amongst the poor enjoys. So he's saying they're taken away from the family, they're taken away from their friends, usually with their family, and by the time they get where they're going, they're not getting any help from anybody, and they're not getting enough money to feed their family. That's his point. So the third section is thoughts on the corruptions of principles and on the numerous evils arriving to the revenue from the too great poverty of the officers of excise. And in this section, he drills right into the nitty gritty of what it's like to be poor. And he makes the comment that if you're not poor, if you have money, which all of his superiors did, they don't know what it's like to be poor. And he describes that in really, really lovely language. And then in the last section, he says remarks on the qualification of officers. And what he says here, that these officers are they have to be highly skilled. It takes a long time to be an officer of excise. You have to be able to calculate volumes of asymmetric costs of brewing, and you have to understand the gravity of the beer. It goes on and on and on. You have to be extremely numerate, and you have to be extremely literate. You have to write in a fair hand. You have to swear allegiance to the crown several times. You have to belong to the Church of England. You can't be a dissenter. You can't be a Quaker. You can't be any of the other denominations. It's very strict, and it takes a long time. You have to be recommended by someone. Mr. Coxsedge recommended Paine. He was a recorder in Thetford. His mother's father was the attorney, so he's well connected in that. Something might come out later about the Duke of Norfolk again, we'll see. but it takes a long time. You have to petition. The person that puts you forward has to put up money to for surety, and so it goes on. So it's not an easy thing to do, and there aren't that many people can do it either. And what Paine says, if you bundle that in with the corruption and the low wage, you're not earning more than a labour. They actually can't get people to be commissioners officers of excise, and they're taking people of a lower ability. So the whole thing is a downward spiral. Now, in his case, what he does is he lays it out bit by bit, and in it, he actually attacks sideways the corrupt supervisors, the corrupt collectors. Now, don't forget that these collectors are the ones who have to take in the petition originally and pass it around all the officers to sign a petition, really, against them. So this is deep, deep into the mechanics of the state at the most intense level. This is what's financing the country, the Navy, the Crown. This is where all the money's come. They know it isn't working, and Paine is given that insight into the state mechanism. And in writing the case, he's not a revolutionary. He's trying to make things better. He's working in the service of his king with some very connected people, and at the same time reading the Sussex Weekly Advertiser or newspaper. It's William Lee, by the way, the owner of the newspaper that prints the 4,000 copies of the case of Officers of Excise. Paine is writing those letters, and in those newspapers from 1768 to 1774 in particular, there is a riot going on, anti-king, anti-Bute, anti-corruption. They're under attack all the time. The Wilkes furore, and it turns out that Paine is deep in writing against the state at the same time as doing this. But he's probably only able to do that because he can see inside the state through George Lewis Scott's eyes and access to central records in the Excise Office in London. So just briefly then, so I think that's the bones of this book. It's, Paine he's an organizer here. He's a thinker, he's a writer. And I came to the conclusion in Lewis that what Paine is essentially is a professional writer. He's a craftsman writer. He can write. And he's proved that. I think it comes out from his letters to the Sussex Weekly Advertiser. I think he's noticed by William Lee, who knew George Lewis Scott with the second Duke of Norfolk, in an earlier organisation called the Society for Encouragement of Learning, which Scott had organised a committee to try and get writers' work out there without the stationers and publishers taking all the money. They didn't succeed, but that was Scott's effort as well. So he's in the literary mind, and William Lee at that point was apprenticed to Bettenham, who was a stationer in London. Very important people. They run all the the stamps, the newspapers, what could be written, what couldn't be written, all the materials and supplies. Very central to the whole business, and so he knew that. Scott introduced Paine to Benjamin Franklin. So that's, very briefly the case of the Officers of Excise, how I came to find it, and some of what lies within. But the more you read it, the more you realise he's deep in how a country runs. He knows it. Also, Lewis, he sits on the poor law, on the vestry in St Michael's Church, and he sits as a juryman on the court leet. So not only does he get a look into state mechanism at the highest level, he acts as on the vestry, administering the poor law. He's acting as a juryman, which is a kind of a counsellor on the court leet, and he's reading that newspaper. So and he's getting that cacophony of noise, of which I'm just about to embark on a 3-year research project. I've just signed the agreement, a 3-year research project. We'll be putting that all online with all these voices coming into it. So it's a very exciting period to come. So I think I've probably said enough. I'm open to questions if you like. I hope some of that made sense anyway.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It's really great. Do we have any questions?
Anybody? One? I have two questions. Can you
Good.
hear me? Okay, good.
Say who you are.
One,
Say who you are.
Gary Burton. He knows who I am.
No, the audience doesn't know, Karen. There's an audience.
Okay, the two questions. First, we've discovered that you just said it at the end of this, that Paine met George Scott through Franklin.
Other way round, Gary. He met Franklin through George Lewis Scott.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's right. I would disagree with that, but doesn't matter.
No.
He knew Franklin well before that.
Okay.
57. So anyway.
Okay. Well, yeah. This is exciting. What's coming out?
Yeah.
I look forward to this. Yeah.
The other thing is that petition with a lot of signatures, you said, and you thought that might have been Paine writing the petition. If you can type that out and send it to me, I can verify who wrote that.
Okay, I will do that. I have that transcribed.
Yes.
I have that transcribed. I'll send it.
Okay, just send it to me and I'll test it.
Yeah.
For authorship. So that'll clarify it for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Questions?
Thank you.
Next. Okay, Barbara.
Yeah. So, Paul, you describe what comes across in Paine's writing as a real sense of grievance, I think, that he felt in empathy with the excise officer and maybe himself as an excise officer. He felt a lot of grievance. And that kind of grievance maybe carries over when he comes to America and begins to think about the ideas here and writes Common Sense and so on. But do you think he had grievances before he became the excise officer, or was being an excise officer and the way they were treated and regarded, was that something that fueled his grievance, or was it already there?
Oh gosh. Well, he married Mary Lambert over in Kent there, and her father was an excise officer who had been discharged. So he would have learned something about the excise officer and being discharged, but it was so common to be discharged. Ledbetter writes the tome, the book that everybody reads to be an excise officer, was discharged himself. He knew about it. Whether it's grievance or not, I don't know. I really can't answer that question. I imagine he starts feeling it when he's been unfairly discharged for doing something he didn't do, and knowing that was happening all over the country. That's why I argue in this book, which I hasten to add is not a biography in any sense. I know I say that at the beginning of the book. This isn't a biography. This is trying to figure out what happened, and I think if he develops a grievance, it's then, and then I think he's a whistleblower. He's brave enough to come forward with it or embolden George Lewis Scott. So we don't know the insides of this actually. But yeah, grievance, certainly he had them, I think, and lays it out clearly. He never consummates the marriage with Elizabeth Olive, and he says in the case that they don't get paid enough to have a family, and he didn't consummate his marriage. I think that's a nod to that. He lends a friend of his some money, which he does get paid back, but it's a friend of a fellow officer with a family. Paine didn't have children. He says he can't afford them, and he points that out as part of his relief. But I think also later he does write, and you would have come across this, Gary, that he found out the traditions of the royal family from the amiable old gent George Lewis Scott. So I think Scott talked about the royal family and how sort of balmy that was at that time with Bute. King George didn't have control. There was there was a bungling ministry. They bungled America. They were bungling in Corsica. This is all laid out in the newspaper, by the way, in vivid, glowing language. So that the country's a mess anyway. Gosh, it sounds a bit like now, doesn't it? But there we are. He's just trying to he's trying to organize a better society. This is the thing. He's trying to make things better. So he's a systems man, and some of his writing is close to it's almost Shakespearean, because what he does is he touches on core human values, and it's these values that come through the case that are as transferable to the right now as any time in history. So it is contextual because of things that happened at that time, but what was happening at that time is happening now, and the same rules apply and the same solutions apply as well. So that if you pay everyone a fair wage, you don't need the corruption. Sorry, Barbara, I went on a bit there.
We're done. It's Gary again.
Yeah.
I forgot what I was going to ask. That's why I came over here. We discovered in the collected writings that's coming out, the period he was in Lewis, 68 to till he left.
74, yeah.
Yeah, he wrote more essays in that period than any other time in his life.
Wow.
And with the tasks of the excise officers, he had to have someone protecting his input, like into the excise, because there's no way. I mean, if you see, you'll see the quantity of articles that he wrote. That would be in volume 5 of the collected writings. It's enormous. And he started 3 more journals, helped them to do it, wrote the first piece in the new journals coming out. So he was writing and editing and doing all that stuff in those few years. As well, he was the only person in Lewis who sat on the town council
Yeah,
for the full 6 years,
Yeah.
and that takes time.
Yeah.
And so there's something
So
going
no
on.
wonder the marriage wasn't consummated.
Yes, yes, that's for sure. So yeah, and like I said, the relationship with Scott is had to be he had to have a hand in sort of protecting Paine, because he quit in 64 from his first job as excise. I forget. It's right around that.
I've got it here, but yeah, it's early. It's early, yeah.
Because that's when he started his writing boom. He wrote a few things for the North Britain before that.
Right.
But from 65 on,
65 is discharged.
65 on, he formed the writing groups that will take place until he left England.
Right.
And the amount of articles that was churned out, even though he didn't write them, he is monitoring a string of articles, and they change the pseudonym all the time. Anti-Sejanus and what's the first one he did? Simplex. That's the first thing he wrote when he quit the excise in 65, and then everything blossomed with his writing. So.
Okay, well that's because some of the letters written in the Sussex Weekly Advertiser under pseudonym, I've strongly suspected a very practiced hand, and the case is written by a very practiced hand.
Yeah.
And that's, with the information I had, I just came to the conclusion.
Right.
He's like Samuel Johnson. He's being employed to write.
Yeah.
And I mean, every officer in England paid 3 shillings to support this writing. So I suspect whether Paine got any of that money or not, but it paid for the printing sounds too much. But that it would make sense to me, and there will be more as I go through the newspaper. I know you've been through it, but I'm going through it again, and I'll flag up, if you like, anything I strongly suspect.
Oh yeah.
Is his, because I think there's more. I think there's more. Yeah.
Great. No.
Paul, I have. Yeah, sorry. Go on. Sorry. Can I interrupt?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could say like something about how this fits into what had gone on before in England as far as organizing workers in any sense, and how it impacted what came after, or what did it have any lasting impact that people know about it?
Yes, indeed. Yes, and I should have said it. It's very important. And thank you for bringing that up. There's so many moving parts here. It's hard to say it all. Yes, a chap called Graham Smith. I talked to him. I found him actually, who was an excise archivist up until, I don't know, 2005 or 2010. He writes a book, the big book for the excise, a history of the excise. Paine's big in it. Okay, so he's done a lot of work on right across from the beginning of the excise service right up until he finished the book. I think it's probably 2010. And in it, and this is fabulous, in the head office of the excise service in England was a bust of Thomas Paine in the excise service. Now, when you think about that, and he says, and Graham Smith says, that every recommendation he made in the case of the Officers of Excise was adopted. It took 50 years, but every single suggestion was adopted. And further to that, Colin Brent, he's still around, Colin, he's a lovely chap. He writes several books on the history of George and Lewis, Oxford educated, very, bright chap. He claims that not only did this include this, because of his recommendations were adopted, it did make the excise more efficient, which did support the Crown going forward. So the antithesis to the Crown, if you like, through common sense, is his writings in the case actually enabled the British Empire to spread, because by rooting out corruption, they could run entire countries with very few people because they had the rules in place. So yes, it went deep. And I ought to mention, in a strange sort of way, and it's May Day today and it's union labour, but Paine isn't the organiser of a trade union. He is in a sense, because he's writing for all the officers and they all want better pay and conditions. I mean, absolutely, that's in trade union territory and absolutely right. But he's doing it from within. He's doing it from the highest office within that organisation. He realises that, they've got to do this to make the country better. And it's that bit of writing, it's that bit of thinking that I think is applicable now. So it's the core themes of his writings would work now in virtually any organisation or government in the world right now. And all the problems that you can see, come from corruption and being unfair to the ordinary worker who can't survive, and all the troubles that brings. So yes, it did. It was very important, I think. It was very important for England.
And what would you say, like, what percentage of the revenue of the Crown came from the excise office? I mean, did they have their other revenue streams, or is this the main way they made money?
Well, it's hard to work it out actually. The excise officers work for the king, right? He's their boss, but the money goes to the treasury. So I don't. The king's getting £800,000. Actually, I do have the figures. I don't think I can crunch the numbers in real time, but I do say in this book that figure is there. How much they collect? I think it's £1,500 a year, but it should be double that. and they're getting paid £50. So they're seeing all this money float in front of them as well. And it's when you haven't got any money yourself. And Paine says it himself. If a man's in want, in the case he says this, if a man is starving and needs to feed his children, then he has a perfect right to find the money where he can. That's not immoral. But anyone who takes it out of greed deserves the gibbet. Well, virtually everyone above him was taking it out of greed. So, but he does this. He cleaves morality and gets to human nature at the root philosophical level. He does it time and time again. I think he does it right through his writing career, actually. Yeah.
And so there's no land tax. I mean, an agriculture.
Yeah, there's a customs. Yeah, there's a customs service is separate to the excise service. Yeah, there are other streams. So I don't know the exact answer to your question of how much goes to the Crown or otherwise. But what is clear is there isn't enough money.
Because this is a theme in British history, the fight between the Parliament and the King and who could raise money, and how the King is always trying to figure out new ways of raising money for himself around Parliament's back. Does this fit into that?
Yes. Yeah, there is a tension. I mean, it's William of Orange coming in. It's the separation of powers. I mean, the French thought we'd had a revolution, really, with separating the church from the Parliament and the Crown from Parliament. So you had a tripartite state, a balanced state, where people could and controlled by Parliament. So it's no longer the divine right of kings. So it's secular in that sense. That's happened. And so it's a fairly well balanced system, which, strangely enough, we've just seen in the Senate, haven't we? Didn't we see that in the Senate? Didn't we see the King remind Congress that they have the power for checks and balances? Why aren't they using them?
Yeah.
Isn't it extraordinary? 250 years later, you've got the King coming across and reminding Americans how to do it. I don't know. Did you find that amusing over there? When that
Yes, it's been on Facebook.
It was extraordinary. Yeah, there we are. So yeah, there've been different schemes, but King George III struggled, and and that's why they looked at this system to improve revenue. But was struggling.
Yeah, my last question. So, what I don't understand, he sort of goes on a lot in this about poverty in general, and sort of talks about rich people not understanding how bad poverty is. It seems like a tactical mistake almost, when you're talking to a lord of, the high British officials about trying to get them to raise pay a little bit. Why talk about the general poverty? You could talk just about the struggles of these the excise officers, but why bring in inequality in general?
Well, he had to address it. He had to address the mechanics of corruption, and the mechanics of corruption were coming from above. They were coming from the supervisors and the collectors, and virtually everyone was above them. But he had to finger them in order to analyze why this was happening, and in that he describes poverty, the poverty that they're undergoing, and what that does to someone when they're in poverty. In fact, there's a rather elegant bit, if I can find it quickly, that he says about conscience. I mean, there's so much to this, and obviously it's going to deepen with the collected works coming out. But no, I can't find it that quickly. But he says it very elegantly about how conscience can be dealt with if you're starving, and if your children are starving, you can overcome your conscience. So the conscience of corruption can be put to one side if you're in that position. So,
Anyway,
was there anything else? Or
Yeah, we should wrap up, but I just do want you to say a word or two about exactly what you're looking for in the newspaper project that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, I can show you actually. Do you want me to show you?
Oh,
Sure.
yeah,
Probably
sure.
it's probably the easiest thing to do. So I'll share, and I need to tell me if is this working? Yeah. Can you
Yeah,
see
yeah.
that? Yeah.
Let me
Well,
see it.
over here, what I think I've shown you this, Gary, actually, but over here, when I got I got it digitized into PDF, so it took me a long time to slice up all the weeks and the months and the years into individual. And what I did was, let me just come again. Let me move that. Let me go here and down here, and I've got a color code. I developed a system, and this is the system. It will show now. So this is what I thought, um, because Junius was appearing, and I know Gary's got a lot more to say about that later. I won't go into it now, but the letters of Junius were incendiary, and up until now, no one knew who he was. Um, but I figured that Paine would be interested that anything that Junius was interested in. And so I've classified them in this way. It's my classification. Other people can do their own. And what I did was, I think anything Wilkes was doing, would it be of interest? King Ministry corruption, and I've color coded. Can you see that?
Yes.
Corsica was another big argument going through whether the ministry was bungling it. Anything to do with Thomas Elizabeth Samuel Olive is lime green. Lewis Excise is black. America is yellow. There's a load of America. Electioneering screen, that's funny. Of interest is orange. Odd is pink, and Junius is light blue. And so what I did then was, can you see the newspaper here? Can you see that? And can you see my
Yes.
colours? Can you see my colours there?
Yeah.
What is I do is I go through and I dot the article, okay? And then on a word a word document, I then go, can you see what I'm doing here? So that's May 1770, page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. I go through the color code. There it says at the end it's red, and I put who it is at the beginning. And I do a little précis, okay, of that newspaper. Now, now this has become searchable because I put all the Word documents together into a book. They're all in one place. If you tap a keyword in, bang, they all come up. The color, the edition, the page, everything, you can get back to the original article. And then I can start screening the Word document for storylines. Because what happens in this newspaper is composited weekly by Lee. He gets the newspapers, all the newspapers down from London every day, and he composites a weekly newspaper out of all the articles. On the front page, you get. I'll show you a front page. I'll pick one out here. Can you see the months? And these are the weeks. And these are the pages. I'll pick out this one. I haven't classified this one yet. It's a later one. So you can see at the front of the newspaper, it's international news, and then it goes national news, and then in the national news, what he does, because he gets several London newspapers, and some are one is owned by the Crown, the others, like the Advertiser, is owned by people who are not frightened to attack the government. There's several newspapers, and he picks out the storyline. So he report the same story about 5 times from the little bits from each newspaper. They look like tweets actually, and so they're slightly different, but it's the same telling. And then then he goes through every day, so the story inches forward through during the week. So you get all these different views on the same story, progressing during the week and over the weeks and months actually. So it's those storylines and timelines that are a great interest, and and they're a lot of fun as well, and really actually quite harrowing, some of it. I mean, in court, there's court proceedings, and the jail is the main assizes at that time in Horsham. They're not in Lewes, and then so a chap's found guilty of, I don't know, he steals a horse or something, and they ordered him to be branded in the hand right then, and they do it in court. It's extraordinary. They burn his hand with a branding iron. This sort of thing, it's really the insights are incredible into 18th century England in a county town. And this is a Whig newspaper, by the way. So it's not a Tory, and whether Lee is a Whig or not, I don't know, or whether he's writing for his audience. I think he's a businessman. I think he's writing for his am I back with you again? Have I stopped sharing?
Yep.
I think he's writing for an audience. I think he's writing for his readership. It gets walked all over Sussex and Kent. It makes Maidstone. It makes, you get newspaper carriers. There's some nice images of people who pack horses with all the newspaper bundled over them. It's made out of newspaper. It's made out of paper made of rags, so the paper endures. And it's passed around coffee houses, and mainly, like Paine's writing, it's read out a lot. The literary levels aren't as high as they are now, so they're read out in use. They're handed around. They endure. So it's a great study, and I mean, there's years of it to go, and it'll be very enriching, I think, when we get there, and it'll start to go online. I hope later this year. That my first couple of years with my metadata, and so that people can go through my stuff, they can search for things, and that'll pop them into the edition, and then they can, in actual fact, be able to download the newspapers and have a go themselves. So if you're interested in horses, perhaps that's all you look for, or farming, or there's all these reports in the newspaper. But does that answer your question, Barbara? So I went on a bit again.
Yes, very well. Thank you. I think we're ready to wrap up.
Sure.
Paul, this has been amazing. Thank you.
It's a
I think
pleasure.
we should say something. We have the next events coming up. Gary, when are you speaking in Yonkers?
May 6th.
May 6th and May 9th. It's the next one. After that, 6th and 9th. And 14th are the 3 in May.
Right. So May 6th at the Yonkers Public Library. The talk will be by Gary Burden, our president, on the class struggle for democracy and the myth of the founding. On May 9th, this is all on our website, by the way. But May 9th, our board member, Richard Briles Moriarty, and William Hoagland will be talking about how common sense is not enough. It's the title of that talk. And the next will be May 14th, right here in
It'll be the 16th.
No, it's
No,
going to be
no.
a birthday.
14th.
on the 14th, Boston University's Joseph Rezek will be giving a talk in town.
It's Saturday
Yeah.
on the website.
So it's all on the website. We'll try to make sure it's all right, because it does say Saturday there. But thank you very much. Paul.
Thanks.
Paul Myles.
Where can I get those glasses?
Oh, I'll send you the link. They're not expensive. I have all the colours, and they fit in your pocket, and they last about 6 months, and then I break them and change the colour.
Very good. Very good.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks
Well,
again.
thank you very much. Thanks for your
Thank you.
attention. Yeah. See you soon. Cheers. Bye bye.
All right.